Hey guys, Michelle here. Today I wanted to talk about what is reactive abuse, why toxic people love when you engage in reactive abuse, why this is exactly what causes some people to think that they are the narcissist, and last but not least, I want to talk about how to stop. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get started. What is reactive abuse? Okay, so we talk a lot about toxic people, narcissists, emotional vampires, emotional abusers. We talk a lot about their bad behavior. But guess what? A lot of times victims wind up engaging in behavior that makes them question if they are the narcissist or the toxic person. So reactive abuse is reacting to abuse in a way that you're not proud of. You might react with screaming. You might react by throwing things. You might react by insulting the person that is abusing you. Some people have reacted physically. And I'm not minimizing those behaviors because they're wrong. And anyone that has engaged in reactive behavior knows that and feels bad about it. But because it's there, because it's happened, it makes them question if they are the abuser. So let's talk about why that is. Emotional manipulators, and this could be narcissists, but we're not just going to confine emotional manipulation to narcissists. It's anybody that engages in emotional manipulation. They love to blame shift. They also hate to see anything negative in themselves. They hate to take any responsibility for any of the problems. And this is why normal, healthy behaviors don't work with emotional manipulators. For example, if you are in an argument with an emotional manipulator and they are angry, they're losing their cool, they're insulting you, they are shaming you, they're acting abusively, right? And you're calm and you're reasonable and you're patient and you hold it together, it never brings about good results. In a healthy relationship, when you handle things in a healthy manner, there's reconciliation. But all of your healthy behaviors only make the argument seem to be worse. It's almost like the toxic person gets angrier, more abusive, crazy. Because, I'm going to explain why. Because at that moment, it's very obvious that they are the ones that are acting wrong. It is extremely obvious to you, and it's extremely obvious, whether they admit it or not, to them. So what happens is they prolong the abuse, whether it's combined with the silent treatment or they continually jab, insult until guess what happens? You explode. We're all human. When we are in a relationship with somebody that doesn't let up until we explode, guess what happens? We start exploding faster because on a subconscious level, we start realizing that's the behavior that creates change, because the second you explode, the other person calms down. The emotional manipulator calms down for two reasons. The first reason is because it alleviates them inside. It helps them to believe once again their false image that they're perfect and you're the one with the problem. As soon as they see you acting like them, because basically that's what happens, right? You lose your cool, you're angry, you're insulting, you're giving it back. As soon as you begin acting like them, they say inside themselves, oh, it wasn't me. See, I'm not the one with the problem. He or she is the one with the problem. But even worse is that it gives proof and tangible evidence that you are the problem. The second you explode and act out of character, you yell, you insult, you are extremely over emotional, the toxic manipulator starts saying that, look, see, this is why we have problems. You are so unstable. You have problems. You need help. And the victim knows that that's not them. That's not who they are at the core, but this who they aren't keeps coming up more and more frequently. They don't realize that the emotional manipulator is fabricating that so that there's more and more evidence piled against you that you are the problem. And that's why so many people that are in that situation either think, wow, maybe I am the narcissist. I've acted like that. They'll hear what toxic manipulators do and how they respond and how angry they get, and they think, oh my God, I've done that. It's because of this reactive abuse. So if you're like, okay, well then how can I tell if I'm the narcissist or I'm the one with the reactive abuse? That's a good question. So the way you can tell is how the person talks about what they've done. For example, anyone that has engaged in reactive abuse, and hello, I'm not innocent of that. There were times where I was acting like someone that I wasn't in ways that I wasn't proud of, right? So anyone that's been in reactive abuse will admit it. They won't say I've been in reactive abuse. They will own responsibility for what they did. They'll say, you know what? I acted in a way that I wish I hadn't. I screamed and yelled. I'm embarrassed by what I did. I don't like how I responded. So they'll own it without even pointing the finger as to why. The truth is, it doesn't matter why, right? We'll still feel bad because we did it. We'll still feel bad because we'll think, wow, I wish, despite that person's behavior, I wish I hadn't done that. So we won't blame the other person. We will own it. Somebody that has engaged in abuse, not reactive abuse, somebody like a narcissist will ever say that. They'll completely put all the responsibility for all of the problems on the other person. And if they do a false apology that sounds like they're taking responsibility, they will always have a but in there. They'll say something like, yes, I shouldn't have done that, but had she not or he not done this or that, I never would have done that. And they will always minimize what they did while still blaming the other person. Whereas somebody that's been in reactive abuse realizes that they own that responsibility of what they did. They recognize it was wrong. So that's one way you can tell. If you're in that situation where you're wondering, am I the narcissist? I've done those behaviors. Ask yourself, do you feel bad about your behavior and can you talk about it? Or do you constantly try to dismiss it and point the finger at the other person so that you only talk about the bad in the other person? Okay, those are some ways that you could tell. So, you know what reactive abuse is. We learned why toxic people love it, because it gives them that evidence that it's you and not them. You learned how to tell if you're wondering if you are in reactive abuse or you are the narcissist. You learned how to tell the difference. And the last, but probably most important part of this video is learning how to stop it. Something that helped me was learning to observe without absorbing. And when I first learned that tactic, it wasn't like, oh, I learned it overnight, I'm good, I got it down pat. No, it took a little while for me to learn how to do that. So for example, if somebody abusive in my life was name calling me and calling me like absolutely horrible things that if I had a worst enemy, I don't think they would ever say to me. At those moments, rather than feeling the pain of what was being done, I was watching, observing. In other words, I was present with my thoughts, and I was saying, wow, that's really unkind. I was saying in my mind, and I was noticing and observing, look, I'm not reacting, and notice how much worse this person gets when I don't react. And I was watching the escalation take place because they were used to me being reactive as well. And something interesting began to take place. When you learn that observe without absorbing, when you learn that I do not have to react, I do not have to defend myself, I do not have to over-explain. That person can be mean if they want to be mean, but I can still be me. That person can be insultive if they want, but I can still have peace inside. When we learn how to do that, it is extremely empowering. Because when we are reacting to abuse, we don't feel empowered. Even if you're yelling, even if you're having all this anger, which anger supposedly makes you feel more powerful, you don't feel powerful because you feel out of control. You feel like your ground isn't solid beneath you. But when you begin to observe it, to recognize the manipulation that they're doing and recognize your ability to not react, your ability to stay you, it is extremely empowering. But in order to get to that point where we can observe without absorbing, we have to accept fully the belief and understanding that the toxic person is allowed to be angry if they choose. We'd rather they did it, but it's not in our power to control the other person, to make them happy, to make them calm. That's their choice. So they're allowed to be whoever they want to be, and you're allowed to stay you. So get back in touch with who you were before the abuse. How did you normally handle things? Were you calm? Were you patient? Were you reasonable? Begin being you again, even if the other person doesn't have a positive reaction to it. You're being you, not to control the other person. You're being you because you have the right to be you. So begin being you, and if they are nasty, that's their choice. If they are ugly in the way that they speak to you, in their tone of voice, with their expressions, notice it, and notice that that is them. That's not you. I think one of the side effects of narcissistic abuse is how it stops you from being you. Without realizing it, you begin living to help the narcissist or toxic person to behave better, right? Everything becomes about that, and nothing you do is enough because that person finds a new way to bring it out, and you're scrounging to find the secret formula to help them to be at peace with you or to love you and accept you. Unfortunately, by doing that, you live life less and less you. And that's why a lot of people after narcissistic abuse wind up saying, well, what happened to me? Who am I? And they feel like who they are is just a rumor or a mirage, something that they can barely notice anymore, right? So get back to being you. Respond without reacting. Observe without absorbing. And remind yourself that you are allowed to be calm. You are allowed to be who you are, even if that other person denies that that's you or tries to push you outside of the bounds of your true self. Remind yourself that that's them. It has nothing to do with you, and make it a goal to be your authentic self no matter what circumstance you're in. Start over.